Yeah, it looks like most agree with you, PR. So take that for what it is. Milwaukee picks second. They also decided to pick almost every other pick in this round. So I believe they also picked 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 22nd, and just about every other pick because they need the help. So, but they picked second, and they took Joe Wing, the other guy we've been talking about. Um, Now he's another ground ball pitcher. Who's 16, a lot of room to grow. Controls about where you want to see it. Movement one above overall. I mean, everything looks good. Amateur numbers, for what they are for his age, look pretty solid. Um, doesn't even have any home run issues. Pretty good strikeout to walkout ratio. Pitches are going to be interesting. Definitely as a cutter is his number one pitch. Curve is his second. Fastball's third. So that'll be something to look into. Probably won't make a difference. But I mean, when arguably the best pitchers off the board, you take the next best pitcher on the board. So I think Milwaukee does good with this pick, taking a wing second overall. Which striking game did I fall into that time, Dave?
Yeah, Wing's good. I mean, a guy who's 16 years old, Mogul likes to do some really fun things with those guys. I could definitely see this guy being an ace. And him being so raw, though, there is a bit of risk to it, and that Mogul can do some really weird things. So maybe he doesn't quite develop as you expect. Maybe that movement jumps ahead of his control a little bit earlier. However, screw it. He's 16 years old with that kind of a build and the overall peak, the endurance, the health, nothing's crazy. Yeah, go for this guy. He definitely had to be one of the top picks in the draft.
He, he was the best player on a scout file, and he projects to be in a low 90s control and upper 90s movement with upper 70s power. So he hits that. I mean, he should be a very, very good pitcher. So, right. Yeah, you want to see 90s to have that prototypical ace build. You see that 85 plus. It's still a good build. I mean, Matty, did you just trade a guy that was very similar build and 85 control and upper 90s movement?
Yeah. Um,
Wasn't
well, I mean,
Runyard like that?
Runner's close to like that. Still has another jump left. So I guess if you're saying where he could get into another jump, he'd get there definitely. Um, but yeah, so I think if you look at where Rudyard is, he's on the Reds now. I don't know. Yeah, he only has 12 starts, so whatever you can pick from that. But you have a guy with a very nice ground ball rate, and a guy right now sitting at a career 3.44 ERA. Again, 12 starts, but I mean that's a build that I like. That's a guy that honestly I thought just do I trade him or do I keep him because if you rebuild for 4 or 5 years, a guy's still there.
Yeah. No,
Well, I think the
just
same could be said about any prospect like Merg Merg in the right. Yeah, right.
yeah, I feel like staying in GB make money off these guys every year. They draft these 16-year-old pitchers that either people like or people are a little bit iffy on, and then they almost always turn out. I'm trying to think of the one that GB took. I think it was Givens, who's now on Seattle. I mean, he's looking pretty solid right now, but I remember on draft day there was a lot of question about what he'll end up with, you know, down the road when he ages, when he's further away from 16 and closer to usable. So, um, I mean, he's just one of those many guys I think that everybody's either likes or doesn't like. And he turns out, I mean, Givens is 20 now and he's a 82.95. And it's a 72, 72, 81. I mean, the best thing you've ever seen? No, but with a 50% ground ball rate, especially if that control gets up there, I mean, he might have that run yard type appeal, maybe better. So, um, you never know. But LA traded up to pick next. They took Adolfo Salinas. Um, and he's one of those pitchers that always stymies me a little bit. He's the guy with the same control and power. They're both 10 above his overall, which is great to see. Movement's a little bit behind, has a low ground ball rate. Like, what does this guy project out to be? What kind of pitcher um, does he end up being? Like, I've seen some of these guys that end up pitching really well. I see some of them end up pitching like crap. This is just one of those I feel like there's hit or miss builds. Does he get to where he's projected? Does he get into the 90s control and then the upper 80s? power and movement? Or, what what does Mogul have in store for him? I like the pitcher. I think he's quite interesting. I think that his amateur numbers are phenomenal, minus the 1 year for home runs, first year in college, which tends to go a little high anyway. Um, Dominant fastball already at 20 years old. It's in the 80s. So I mean, this thing that's probably hitting up in the upper 90s for a fastball. Like, there's a lot to like here. Um, I think it's a good pick. I think jumping up to get this guy is probably a good choice. Even though I do like the next pitcher quite a bit as well. I think Salinas was a good choice at three.
Yeah, I guess I'm not a real big fan of him just because of pitchers that have that kind of a gap in their movement to control, and then and seeing how he projects to develop. Those are the guys that have trouble. And when you look at his homers, he has a few years that are pretty high. Um, you know, usually the guys that don't have any issues, their their homers are really really low, or their batting average is pretty low. And with him having that kind of a red red flag, no, I just see him getting beat up. And a place like Los Angeles now, with them being a big time homer park, yeah, he's just gonna get obliterated there. Right. It's like in my file, let's see, it projects him out as 91 control, about 86, 87 power, and about 86 movement. And that kind of a gap usually gets guys beat up.
Well, and just like everything else, and you can drink already, Dave. Time will tell. Florida goes next to four, taking Josh Barnes, a 19-year-old right-hander. Another one of those guys that I typically like, a little bit of a power build, with low home runs and really good strike to walkout ratio. I mean, this is definitely a guy that I had highlighted and underlined on my draft sheet as a guy that I knew wasn't going to make it anywhere close to 30. But just in case, he was definitely a guy that I was kind of high on, even if his projections don't necessarily look the best compared to a lot of these other pitchers that we're talked about, and a lot of these other pitchers going to talk about. But this is definitely a guy that I find interesting. Um, he has that kind of power movement build. He reminds me of a guy that I had a couple seasons ago where he gets to like the just about 80s or low 80s power, control, excuse me, mid 80s, upper 80s power, and then low 90s movement. Those guys had been tending to pitch pretty well for me when I was in Seattle. He kind of reminds me of one of those types of builds. So, Jermaine, Maddie, what do you guys think about Barnes? I think we both played with Tillman. Yes.
That sounds bad. Yeah, I guess it's kind of weird because looking at my file, it suggested that he already jumped, which his overall did jump as well as his peak. But it almost looks like it's more just like a reshuffling of his vitals. So it will be interesting to see if he can actually jump again this year, because that'll mean a lot for him. If he does, he'll have okay control, decent power. Like Jamie said, he's uh, not a real power pitcher, and pretty solid movements. So overall, I think it just seems quite uninspiring, especially for a pick this high. I don't see a really high ceiling for him. He might be able to be a guy who's decent for you, but he's the guy that you look to upgrade as quickly as possible.
All right, five overall goes to St. Louis. St. Louis takes Fernando Masso, 20-year-old right-handed pitcher with average ground ball rate, high control, average power, lower movement. Um, eh, Interesting to see this guy go this high. He was a guy that had been on my list, and definitely a guy that on my list I thought for sure would have more of a chance than most of the other guys that I had marked. Um, as falling further down in the first. Yes, he has a high peak. Yes, he has a higher overall. Um, his pitches say ground ball pitcher, but he's not a ground ball pitcher. And it's just he has one of those builds that I don't really trust. His home runs have been really high. His first 2 years in college, didn't have that freshman 20 and then lose it. He had a freshman 15 and then add another three to it. Um, I I don't know. This was not a guy that I was super expecting to go this early. I mean, he projects a lot. I think like Diller over in the Mets, who was a pretty decent pitcher. I'm just not sure how well he pitches. I have a hard time with these guys that end up being control monsters over everything else. So, Jermaine, Matty, what do you guys think about Masso? His projections are pretty nice on him, but it's just a matter of how that transitions into actual pitches.
97 control, 79 power, and 89 movement. The movement gap is what really kind of gets me. Is that's still a pretty good gap. I think it's just another one of those pitchers that I forget who put it, and I forget exactly how they said it, but a couple drafts ago, something like, "Oh, it's one of those pitchers that you always hope for like great things for, and you get just very decent things from." Something about that. I'm not putting it right in the slightest, but something that of that kind of phrase that he's going to be the guy that you think, oh yeah, he's going to be like a 3.2 ERA pitcher, and then the season happens and he's a 4.1 ERA pitcher. Okay, he's or like a 3.7, whatever. Decent. You can use it, but it's nothing great.
I have the hardest time with these guys because I know Ross Diller, Marty Friedman, guys like that have had almost similar builds. Um, though neither of them quite look the same as Masso, but and both are pitching very well for the Mets. So I mean, it's one of those things that either you get a guy that pitches very, very well, and you're like nailed it, or as Matty said, he doesn't quite fill out, and you're left wanting. So we'll see. Just like all these other ones, we're really not going to know for a few years, but. We'll move on to the Cubs, taking third baseman Jesse Kurlinski, 19-year-old switch hitting third baseman. Um, Decent defense, good power, um, horrible contact, but being a switch hitter, hopefully that makes it okay. Maybe it gets a little bit better. So, yeah, very interesting pick here at six. With all the good pitchers still on the board, a bit surprised to see Kurlinski go already. Um, I know that. I don't know. I just don't know. The contact's low. The eye is already at overall. Power's up, arms up, but the fielding's not too good. Um, so he doesn't project to be a good third baseman. It doesn't look like. Um, First baseman maybe, but oof, I don't know. I don't know. Um, Amateur numbers for power too, like with a 75 power, 19, not hitting tons of home runs in high school there. So I really don't know whether I should like this guy or not. I think I liked Tweety better, but it might have just been me. Maddie, what'd you think?
I really like this guy, even though that my file didn't like him a lot. I think it's because it docks him because of the contact and that he's not a real good fielder. But the thing I think that it underestimates is I believe he should be able to play right field, and he should have. I think by the way we do things, he should have predict some
He is
some
quite.
stats over in right field.
He's good.
If
He has
not,
good predicts at the corners out there.
yeah, if not, at least left field is solid for him. Put him out there; he'll hit some bombs for you. He did hit 10 his sophomore year when he was somehow 18 years old, and then 8 the following year in less plate appearances. So it's probably about the same. Yeah, I think this is the guy that if the contact gets there, he's gonna hit the homers. There's no doubt about that for me at least. And then put him on one of the corner spots in the outfield and be a good player for you.
All right. Well, I'm going to dig on the next pick, and that is the Dodgers picking once again in the top 10, seventh overall, taking Scott Tweedy, 21-year-old third baseman. Um, God, why do I bother talking to some people? Sorry, I am watching messages come across the bottom of my screen and not liking what I'm seeing. I like Twitty. He has that defense that everybody wants, that everybody should want at third base. He's got a nice power build. Contact's clearly going to surpass 70, probably surpasses 80. Eye's a bit of a concern. The eye's not going to be super high. Um, but I've been proven wrong so many times on wanting a high eye with my high power, that I realized that it doesn't have to happen. And his amateur stats are quite nice. Good OPS, definitely hitting for more power than the last guy we looked at. So I know some people were not super high on Tweety, but his birthday is come and gone. Um, I don't recall if he jumped or not since his birthday. I'd have to go back and double check, but I really like Tweety. I thought this was a good pick.
Yes, we have been fooled by it because I think I already know the player that he's going to be. How he might be a better version, but I don't know if that's all that much more valuable. Looks a lot like Randy Simons, an old White Sox pick. It looks like jettisoned out pretty quickly. Um, Made his claim to fame on the GB teams in Detroit, and then I got him in Cleveland for a bit. Simons was a pretty solid guy who was going to hit 20, 25 homers for you, play amazing defense, but really just about a 700 OPS. Decent, but not great. And I think that's where Tweedy is is headed now. He might be better, but I think better might be looking at like 725, 750, which is solid with that kind of defense. But I think when you're taking him at this spot and seeing what he looks like, you think he's going to be an absolute star, and I would question that. Oh yeah, I mean, I don't dislike him. I'm just saying if you're thinking he's going to be like a 900 OPS guy, you're probably not getting that.
He reminds me quite a bit of a third baseman that I had, and I'm trying to remember his name and find him. So when I do, I'll mention him, but we'll move on until then. But he reminds me a lot of a guy that I traded to Peter. I swear his name was Andy something, but I can't recall, and I'm trying to find it. So, but we'll look through and find it eventually. We'll move on to the next pick, and that is Montreal taking somebody not 17, which is a shock to most. Um, Picking Rick Riley. I'm assuming Gilly thought it was Riley Reed and got confused, but I might be wrong. Rick Riley is a 20-year-old right-handed pitcher, low ground ball rate, has that power build. And all honesty, looks pretty good. Home runs got a little high last first few years in college, but that strikeout to walkout ratio is something special, especially that freshman year. So um, I think there's a fair amount to like here. Word the fastball is not his dominant pitch, but all in all, I did like Rick Riley. I know he was one of the top four pitchers on the board.
Yeah, I like Riley. His build actually projects to be rather balanced. Projects out around 86 control, 89 power, 89, 90 movement. I think that's kind of like the sweet spot, really. You like the ground ground balls to be a bit higher, but it's decent enough, especially with knowing that he's a power pitcher. Um, I think at this point in the draft, it's very, very good pick. I hope he enjoys Vero Beach. It indeed is.
All right. And on that note, we will move on to the next pick. The next pick in the draft is the pick that I need to find, and his name is Judd Leggett, going to Oakland, ninth overall. Judd is a 20-year-old starting pitcher. Very high ground ball rate, very high control, a little bit lower movement. Control three overs overall, movement three below. Um, Fastball, changeup, curveball in that order. Um, I don't know. Leggett was on my list. Um, Again, as a guy that I thought might fall a little bit further down in the draft because I wasn't sure people were going to like him or not. And I'm still not sure if people are gonna, would, did, or should like him or not. Um, I had him as a guy that was a bit more middling in my book. A guy that's going to be like a back end of the rotation starter, like solid but nothing great. A guy that doesn't hit those 90s that you hope for your power control movement, somebody that falls in the 80s somewhere. So, not a huge fan of Leggett. Think he'll be a solid enough pitcher, but not a guy that I'd be taking at this part of the draft.
Yeah, I don't know if I say I love it, but I do like it. And pretty much everything else that J Main said, you can just co-sign. The ground ball rate is amazing. The home runs aren't really low like you would like to see, but something just tells me that he's going to grow out of those or that those are just bullshit. And yeah, I think he'll be a very serviceable starter, which of course puts some great defense behind him, and he'll be great.
All right. Wrong take, but hot take. Um, Yeah, hot take. I'll agree with hot take. All right. Now that I've successfully found my third baseman that I was thinking of, we're going to move on to the Dodgers' next pick, their third pick here in the top 10. Um, and that is Ramon Menes, a switch hitting 20-year-old right fielder who projects to have a very good glove, a bit of speed, and a lot of contact with a solid eye. He is not going to be the stolen base threat, as we mentioned pre draft, that some people might think. He just doesn't quite have the base running vitals for that. Um, but he should be a very nice outfielder, I think. He was the guy that I had penciled in and circled as like my A choice down at 30 because I thought, based on the fact that he wasn't a true base stealing threat, that he might slide down there to 30. Alas, here he goes at 10, which shouldn't have been much of a surprise. Um, I like the pick. It reminds me a lot of the guy that I think Toronto has, who's not the biggest base stealing threat, but like he does enough of a little bit of everything. So um, and of course, I was thinking of Kieran Ehrenhart, but I think he actually ends up being quite a bit better. The Kieran Ehrenhart, who's a solid player in his own right. So I do like this pick for LA. What did everybody else think?
Yeah, I thought he was solid, but I think the big draw was that he actually has good base stealing prowess, and it's more probably going to be decent to solid. But still going to be a player that you want on your team. Where you hit him, I think all of that kind of stuff is it's just about the build and the other players that are around him. But you can say like number two hitter maybe, or a number 8 or 9 hitter. I don't think it really matters. Whatever he'll be a startable player, but I don't think he'll be great.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to like here. So it'll be interesting to see how he fleshes out. But I really did like the pick. I also like Cleveland's pick here at 11, Sean Webb, 16-year-old right-handed left fielder. Um, a little bit of speed there, very nice defensive outlook. Um, should have some pretty good contact and a really good eye. I think there's a lot to like with Sean Webb. I know he was fell into the top 10 on the scouting sheet, and I think for good reason. I think that he'll be a relatively special outfielder. I think Meta does a very good job to nab him here with the 11th pick in the draft.
Well, the projections they have has him at 86 contact, 76, 77 power, that 82, 83 speed, and a 90 eye. It'll be interesting to yeah, I know who needs him anyways. Just use the eye test and picture theory. Picture theory, I do think it's not the same picture as Mancia, but I think it is a similar picture of an outfielder making a play towards the wall. So if you want to use that, if you want to stretch the theory out a little bit, you can go for that. And I think that's kind of where I see him. I'm kind of a guy who not maybe not like Mancia where he got up to like a 90 whatever, amazing contact, but a guy who can do a little bit of everything. He can play pretty good defense, solid speed, kind of deceptive speed in the fact that it'll steal bases pretty well, and really nice contact. And I do say, for what I saw, was I think he can play center field. Um, I know our friend wearing the Hawaiian shirts did note some years ago that the DRA, at least for the amateur sets, might mean something, and that if they are positive all throughout their career at a certain position, it should mean that they can translate pretty well at that position. So, despite him showing right now 77 in center field, I think he might play much better there. Mancia wasn't all that good on draft day either. At least like his contact and power wasn't. Yep.
Well, good luck. I found the player that I was thinking of. It just took me a while. So while he does that, we'll move on to Jay Tarvin, the next pick, going to the Kansas City Royals with cheese. Um, Not gonna lie, love the pick. I like the bat. I like the glove. I like the health. I like just about everything I see here. Um, he's from Pittsburgh, PA. Minus the fact that he went to LSU. I mean, everything seems great. The only thing I would worry about, obviously, is his birthday, which is coming up in August. What that drop is going to look like. And again, just because when you have a 21-year-old 20 turning 22 here right after the draft, there are some concerns. But with that defense and that bat, I mean, he probably could play now. He shouldn't, just because his contact versus righties is below 70. But I mean, he could play versus lefties right now in the major leagues probably without issue. So I like this pick. I'm very interested to see what that birthday drop might be and what that finalized product might be. But big fan of Tarvin.
Yeah, I liked him. It is the concern for how little of an upside that he has, and that he'll need every jump. If he misses a jump, it really hurts his potential. But definitely a guy who, like I said, you can play right now. Probably more of a third baseman than second baseman, just because of the lack of speed. You could play him as second, but you'll get a lot more mileage and value out of him at third base. Put him there, and actually, right now you kind of have a Randy Simmons guy. So there you go. Not that bad.
Seattle up next, 13 overall, taking Ethan Key, 21-year-old right-handed left fielder. Um, Another one of those interesting outfielders I feel in this draft. There's a bit of speed there. Um, as far as the space stealing goes, it's not for base stealing. I think it's more for defense. Even though his steal tendency is at 89. Um, should smack lefties pretty good. Concerned about maybe how he'll hit righties at 21. He's another one. Come out, Jesus, he have the same birthday as Tarvin, 4 days apart. But his birthday come up in August as well. So um, a lot of it's going to depend, much like Tarvin, on that drop, whatever that's going to be. Finally hit for some good power. That second year in college, his OPS has been pretty good across the board. Um, this was a guy I was mildly interested in, but clearly he went well before I was picking. A little bit worried about again being 22 that August after the draft, um, without knowing what that drop's going to be. But good glove. Looks to be a solid bat. Worst comes to worst, you're gonna have a damn good fourth outfielder. So I think it's a good safe pick at the very least to pick here at 13.
Who are we talking about?
Ethan
Oh, Ethan
Key.
Key. Yeah, he's a guy. He exists. Um, yeah, he's not bad. Yeah, actually, no, I can. Now that, yeah, he's a guy who had defense, so it's not as bad as getting a guy who's probably gonna have just okay offense. But because he can play some defense, there's some added value there. Steals, I guess there are some steals, so that's pretty cool. Um, I guess he just didn't really blow me away, but seeing what he looks like and what he can project to, definitely going to be a guy who could be a starter. Definitely could be. That's it's very confident. Definitely could be.
All right. Cleveland trades back up into the first round to take Jake Towell with the next pick. Um, I like Jake Towell. He was a guy that I liked before the draft. He was a guy I liked during the draft. Um, Obviously, his home runs, 1 per 7, 1 per 8 should be fine. Strikeout to walkout ratio is not as good as I would like to see it. But I like this pick. I like this pitcher. He was one of my top 3 pitchers on the board. Big fan of his. Um, I, I like him. I like him quite a bit. I think based on what we talked about earlier, what Jermaine mentioned earlier, you see a guy that's not a high ground ball rate on draft day, but he's in that 45 range. Here's a guy, 45 range. Um, you should easily bump up to 48, 50, 51, somewhere in that range. I don't think 51 is an actual number you can hit, but um, yeah, I think he becomes a ground ball pitcher. I think he becomes quite a good ground ball pitcher with a little bit of power to go with it. So um, I like him. I like him a lot. Sorry, Maddie. No, apparently every time I like a pick, or Maddie and I both like a pick, it's allegedly going to be a bad player. It's what everybody generally thinks, but hens are going to hen. So
Yeah, I mean, obviously I like the pick because I took him. It'd be kind of weird to say, no, I hate the guy. But I took him. Trading Rudyard for him was a little bit tough because I didn't know if I was getting quite the value just because of, like J-Man said, you're getting a 17-year-old who's 52 overall. If they don't develop, you're really screwed. And sometimes when you get a guy with an overall below 60, Mogul just takes their good old time to get them above 60. And then sometimes by the time they are, it's too late. And then of course the homers, they're obviously high, but you got to hope that with him being just a 52 movement and 52 overall, that there's time to develop out of that. And that's pretty much it. Good control. Let's see what the hell happens.
I think good things will happen. But again, this was one of the pitchers I hooked on early and really liked. And then to watch you trade up and get him, I was just like, oh. So Milwaukee's next on the board with 4 straight picks because fuck it, why not? And they take in order Manny Suaste, Merv Maher, Brendan Katzen, and Jay Horrington. We'll start at 15 with Suaste first, a 20-year-old right-handed pitcher. Another one of these guys that could end up being a ground ball type pitcher when all is said and done. My guess is that is the way that he trends again, based on that 45%, based on the way that his projections show. Um, if that is the case, and if he hits that 90-90 controlled movement, I mean, you're going to have a good pitcher in your hand. Ace pitcher, not sure, maybe. Got a good fastball, got a good cutter, decent changeup. Um, it doesn't throw really hard, which is fine. Um, but I like this pitcher. I think you're looking at a guy that will definitely be a top end of the rotation guy, probably. Um, Next pitcher, 16-year-old right-hander Merv Mayer. Again, this guy already has a high ground ball rate. His control is 11 over his overall, and his movement is at overall. With 3 pitches, a fastball and circle change, both being above his overall, and a sinker. A pitch that more and more that I look at, more and more I like in my ground ball pitchers. Mayer actually rated right above Suaste in the final. Um, Again, looks to be a good, probably mid rotation starter when all is said and done. Um, so I mean, right there, not including the fact that he already took Joe Wing. I mean, he's almost built a full rotation out of this draft alone. And oh, look, another pitcher off the board to Milwaukee next, and Brendan Katzen. Wasn't as high on Katzen. This tends to look more like a little bit of a power build, with the control just over his overall, 3 above it at 21 years old. Even though he's already past his birthday and only had a 2 peak drop, But that dominant fastball, I mean, there's some stuff to like here. Amateur numbers look pretty good. Home runs don't seem to be an issue. Walkout to strikeout ratio is pretty good. I think an interesting mix to throw in with those other ground ball type pitchers that you've already drafted. Um, and then my favorite pick that Milwaukee made in the first round, Jay Warrington. Another one of these guys that I was hoping, as usually happens in some drafts, that people ignore. People ignore the power hitting right handed first baseman. Being that he was the only one in the draft, clearly he was not ignored. His home run and numbers in amateurs are just crazy cool. Um, I really like this guy. I think this guy is going to be probably the. I don't want to say. Do I? Yeah, I think it might be the best bat in the draft. It's gonna be close. There's a couple other good bats. There's a good lefty bat. Some of those third baseman bats look pretty good, but I really like this bat. I think it could end up being the best or one of the best in the draft. So I think it's a very successful four pick run by Milwaukee here in the mid late first round.
All right, so you go ahead.
Trust me, then he'll be fine. Well, let's be fair. Being in my division, I hope he's not great, but
So so I'll stay. He's yeah. That's kind of what I think about him. My file rates him at the number 54 best player, and I don't necessarily hate that because he's already jumped. So I think there's a little bit of a fool's gold with him that you think you're getting.
did you say 54th?
54th is what you rated at.
Wow,
Uh,
I have him at 15th. Yikes.
well, I'm saying on my scouting file, not necessarily
No,
personal.
scouting file, I have him at
Health
14.
well, you probably really screwed something up then, or I changed something and not told you.
Could
That's
be
my
both.
favorite thing to do,
I'm well
to be
aware.
honest. Um, but yeah, but he projects 89 control, 72 power, and 84 movement. That movement gap is what really knocks him down. So it depends on how that's
Hmm.
going to play out. But even if it doesn't play out like you would think, I still don't think it's going to be great. We have not seen him age, obviously, so he might not drop very much, but I think he started at an 84 peak. So if he drops like another four, you kind of do the quick math on that and realize, oh, he might have like 4, maybe 5 years to jump. Um, and he's already had his first one. Eh, Decent pitcher, but not that great. And if you want to go with the pitcher theory, it looks like he has Daisuke Matsuzaka as the pitcher. So I would say you don't want that. Um, yes, he's a pitcher. The next one, Merv, the hell is that? Mayer, whatever. It's weird. I can't mold with just make normal names. But anyways, dude's 16 years old, has a decent starting build. You gotta like that. There's risk, but screw it. 16 years old, a lot of time to develop. The next guy, Katzen. I like the guy, but that's also because I'm a sucker for players who don't drop very much pre-draft. He only dropped 2 points. It is fair to say that he could also just take a long time to develop because of that. But if he doesn't, I think he could be a very good pitcher. I do believe my scouting file liked him a lot too. Yeah, because he didn't drop much, so he usually likes that. Projects him at 83, 80, and 88. Solid build. If he gets a little better than that, especially with a control, really nice pitcher. And next one, Warrington. I don't dislike him. However, I would say that he's not the best first baseman in the draft. There's another player who projects similar as him, was taken later, obviously.
And that player was a lefty,
That is true.
burying the lead. All right. Yeah, I like that player too, but sadly, my new park makes me need righties, so I focus on righties now. But I did like that other first baseman too, but I really liked Warrington. Anyway, Washington, 19th overall, takes Rich Kramer, 18-year-old right-handed pitcher with a average, but 45% average ground ball rate, but does project, or at least appear to be, a bit more of a power pitcher in his build, based on the fact that his power is well above everything else. So, though his strikeout to walkout ratio doesn't necessarily equate to that. Home runs don't seem to be an issue. A plethora of pitches, circle change and sinker be the top two, which tends to make me think that he'll end up leaning more toward that ground ball type pitcher, just based on those being his pitches, and the fact that, yeah, I don't know. He projects to be that control, power, then movement in that order build, um, which tends to work well in some stadiums, tends to work quite well. So, um, if that's the way that he ends up going, um, you know, either way, I think he'll be a serviceable pitcher. One of the best pitchers in the draft, maybe not, but I think he could surprise some folks.
Yeah, I like him. The more I got to looking at trading back into the draft, he was one of the guys that crossed my mind briefly, just because he's a power build, but his ground ball rate's pretty darn good, and you usually don't see that. So that makes me think of, could you get kind of get the best of both worlds? You could rack up some strikeouts and get those double plays. The control, because of all of that, I don't really care about it all that much, but it still does project decently enough, which I always think that I think my file is it kind of under projects control, especially when it has movement just skyrocketing up there, which I think Mogul with his sanity checks kind of takes a little bit of that movement and throws some on the control, but projects at 75 control, 86 power, and 92 move. It could be anything like that with that kind of ground ball rate. That's a damn good pitcher. And we know he's already aged from a 93 to a 90. It's either a 3 or 4 point drop. It's nothing to be concerned about, especially with him being 18. Phew, plenty of time to develop. Probably peaks out at 25 or 26.
All right. And the next pick in our draft is pick number 20. It is going to San Francisco. It is Peter Bauman. Um, and it's a no for me, dog. I want to like the pick, but I can't. I he's 18. He's under a 50. He's a is it 49.88? I thought I had him at a 48.88. Hmm. Anyway, either way, um, I walks more than he strikes out. Guys, amateur numbers are pretty bad. I his projection is not ideal. Um, I no, no. I can't like him. I'm double checking, as you can hear the paper rattling, because for some reason I still have my draft list. He wasn't even on my list. So, and my list was about 60 names deep on the pitching side. Of course, I ended up taking none of them, but well, I think I took two of them. But yeah, I don't like Peter Bottleman. I don't get it. I might be missing something, and that's fine. I just don't like him um, at all. The only thing I like about him is the fact that he had a 2 point peak drop. Outside of that, I got nothing.
Well, for starters, Arvin Tresca says, "Fuck you, J-Main." Other than that, for the pick, um, yeah, it's just throwing something out there because he's really young and really raw and seeing what the hell happens, because no one really knows. I guess if you're any thought to it, it would be there's no way that his control can really be that bad. That eventually you have to think that Mogul's going to say, "Hey, sanity check, boost the control instead of the movement." I mean, and if that happens, you might have a decent enough pitcher. But if he develops it all like the projections have him, that's the guy you quickly throw in the bullpen and just pray like hell you can put the pitch limit down to 20 and limit his damage, and maybe it turns him into a decent pitcher.
All right. Well, sorry, Cheeto. Not the most love on that pick, but maybe you'll do better in the post credit scenes. Pick 21, Oakland goes with Jim Joshua. RN quite happy with this pick. Pretty sure he blasted chat. I got the second baseman I wanted anyway, um, which is good. This is the second baseman I honestly thought he was going to take earlier in the round when he passed on him. So um, I like the bat. I like the power eye combo. I think his defense would be to play a second base if he had to, but probably much better suited as a first baseman. Um, I am a little bit worried by that contact, but the fact that he is 19, will turn 20 over the offseason. I think he has enough room to get that above 70. The fact that he was born in Pittsburgh helps for no apparent reason. Um, I like Jim Joshua. He was another one of those guys that I had circled as a maybe he'll drop because everybody just says fuck it, I don't want him. But I like him. I thought it was a good pick. A nice power bat here in the later end of the first. I feel like his bats could be similar to Brandon Anderson and Arnason, but just not as good with the glove.
Well, I think he's not a second baseman. However, the missed opportunity is that he should have projectors at first base. So slide him there and hope the bat actually hits good enough to be a first baseman. The projections have him at like what, 80, no, 72, 73 contact, 93 power, and an 85 eye. If the bat hits like that, if the contact gets above 70, and the power obviously be in the 90s, which I would think it should be if contact gets in the 70s, and a decent eye, that can definitely be a first baseman for you, but not a second baseman. With that, well, yeah, you can put anyone anywhere. I mean, Mizzy puts Osmart Snow at third base, so you can put anyone anywhere.
I made a mistake. I was trying to get a bat in the lineup. It went
You
horribly,
did.
and
You
it
did
cost
good
me.
at it.
And it cost me the season. Um, Moving on to Milwaukee's next and last first round pick, thank God, Joshua Spots goes 22nd overall. Another guy I kind of expected to go earlier, but clearly with the low control compared to his overall, especially even at 18, and the very low ground ball rate, not a surprise that he slid as far down as he did. But I still like Spots. A bit concerned how he plays out, how high that control gets. I don't think it gets to that magic 80s, um, but if he can get into the mid 70s, and it doesn't project to do so, um, with the power and movement that he'll have to go along with that, he could end up being a decent, if not good, pitcher. Reminds me of the guy that Hokie had that had like 74 control, yet was throwing like low three ERAs um, for a while. And then he ended up getting like a decent comp pick out of him the 1 year. So I think that G Money has a right. Scary risk with high reward. He doesn't say high reward, but that is what it is. Um, and apparently TT has blocked me as well. So I'm just add him to the list of people that have blocked me. Um, but this part of the draft, good pick because if he plays out the way that he could, you have a great pitcher in your hands. And if not, you're not as worried about it, especially some of the other picks you've already made in this round.
I would say pass. Do not like him. With that kind of a power build, I don't think the control develops worth a damn. And the low ground ball rate. mixed in with some high opponent batting averages and highish home runs. Just it just doesn't have me interested at all in him.
Pick 23, as we extend into our eighth hour of the draft podcast. 17-year-old, of course, because it was picked by Montreal, Luis Del Paz, um, a left-handed pitcher, um, with an interesting build, good control, good power, movement at overall, solid health. Three good pitches. Um, I liked this pitcher. He was a guy that was on my list. I actually had him high on my list. I believe when I sent Andy a top nine as I was rushing out the door before draft for my pick at 30, I believe he was the second or third player um, on that list. I think that he has a chance um, to be a pretty nice mid to upper rotation starter. So to watch him fall and think that I might have a chance at him was a nice pipe dream. I think Gilly does well to go with his gut and take a 17-year-old here at 23 overall.
Do you have a guess for what his movement will be? Because he's been pretty close for the projections so far. No? Okay.
He was talking to you. I
You
know the
were
projections.
anyway, so yeah, you got like the low 80s control right and about the 85 power, also with a 91 movement. I really like this guy. Um, again, this would be one of the guys when I was trading back in that I was looking at. Just a real intriguing build, kind of a power build, but the GB rate is pretty nice. Now the homers are high, but of course you give him a pass. Being 17, Gilly's sweet spot, and with a 51 overall and 51 movement. Um, but yeah, I think this is a really nice pick to get him at this point in the first round is really nice.
All right, and we will move on to Bruno Duarte, a 17-year-old left-handed pitcher, um, a power bill with a good fastball. It's another one of those guys that I think is going to be similar to um, who we talked about a couple picks ago on Spots. I don't think he's going to have quite the same amount of power as Spots does, but I think that control gets a bit higher. I still don't think it necessarily breaches 80, but I think it gets a lot closer to doing so. Was the other guy I think that was second in my pitchers portion of the list that I sent to Andy, thinking that people would ignore him because he's a lefty and he's a power build. But I think there's some stuff to like there. I definitely think, especially if he gets over that 75 control and gets closer to that 80, that he could end up being quite a good pitcher to have on your team. Um, and one of those guys, maybe you would even consider, God, I hate to say it, make it a closer and seeing what he could do in that role.
All right. Once again, J Main, I ask you to project the movement.
Oh, so
Okay,
close.
so close, but 76, 91, or 92, and 94, 95, which I would say I don't see the movement getting that high. The projections just overestimate that when they get into the high 90s, and Mogul will probably slap that onto either power or control. So this could actually be a very, very interesting pick. This is one where, to be honest, I would say I'm kind of going back to the roots of I don't really care that much about control. I know based on who I took in the first round, that doesn't really suggest that, but in general, um, get guys out. Don't care about if you walk guys because there's so many double plays that screw it. Get him out. Don't allow the homers and get the double plays. And I think that's what he will do eventually. Very, very nice pick.
We will move on to Brent Zimney going to the Giants, 16-year-old right-handed pitcher. Another power build, another very low ground ball rate. The Giants seem to be another one of those teams that are a little more willing to take that chance on those guys than a lot of other squads, um, and it tends to work out for them. He looks to be almost a near carbon copy of spots who we just talked about. Low control, low 70s control, um, good power, good movement. Another guy that was on my list just because I thought most people would ignore him. Um, and a guy that at 16, I'm more than willing to take a chance on. I think this is another guy that, based on how young he is and how much time he could have to develop, might end up being a much better pitcher than we expect. That, that there's a reason they're going here in the late 20s and not in the early teens.
Yeah, see, I think he looks a lot more like Duarte. He's just a step below him. The control is is the biggest gap, but you know, where the power and movement will probably be a little bit below him. Um, so I think overall, I don't think this is a bad pick. Uh, you get a guy who's 16 years old, you just go for it. The only concern would be that his ground ball rate is only at 20%. Just speaks to he might have an issue of keeping balls in the park. That would be a big concern. Really, honestly, another concern with me would be his pretty low health. Even if he does get good, he might only be able to give you 25, 27 starts per season. But at this late in the draft, can't really fault someone for trying on a pitch like this and seeing what can happen.
Yeah, I agree. 26 overall, Adam Greathouse goes to LA, 16-year-old right-handed second baseman. Um, he was not on my list for whatever reason. Um, Bat projects to be solid enough, a little bit of speed to go on that defense. Defense looks okay. Glove wise, decent eye. Yeah, I was a bit ho hum on him, to be honest. He was not a guy that, first of all, not a guy that I thought would drop too far based on his age and his overall peak. And not a guy that I was too interested in. I think he's got a pretty good glove for second base, especially with that little bit of speed to help out. And I think he's got a pretty solid bat. Not great, but solid. So I mean, I definitely think he's gonna be a starter. But and I guess this late in the draft, especially based on 16, definitely not a bad pick. I'm just not sure how good that bat ends up being.
Yeah, I think I just go back to Andy's adage of looking at what does he do well, other than not commit errors. I don't know what else he does well. There's nothing that jumps out with the bat. His eye is a very low strikeout eye, not necessarily that he's going to walk a lot. And with those splits being pretty drastic, just has me concerned what kind of impact he will have there. And not real fast and range. I guess it'll be good, but overall defensively, I don't. It's not like he's an elite guy there. So think he's just another guy there at second base. You can start there, but it's not going to wow anyone, or people aren't going to be messaging you saying, "Hey, is this guy available?" They don't care.
Well, again, time will tell, as it will for Kansas City's next pick, Benji Garasso, a 18-year-old right-handed pitcher. Um, a nice ground ball looking pitcher with a little bit of power and some good pitches to go along with it. Nice strikeout to walk ratio, no home run issues. This is a guy that I believe one of the many guys that I try to pick next round, just to be told, "Stop it, you idiot." But I like this pick. I thought this was a good guy. I think that he's going to be a pretty good pitcher to come to tell. I don't think he's going to be an ace, but I could definitely see a good mid to upper rotation starter. Nice ground ball, control movement kind of guy with a little bit of power to go with it to help that edge of stuff. So we'll see, but I think this is a good pick, especially this into the draft.
Yeah, I really liked him. Of course, again, I'm a sucker for players who don't drop much when they age. He did not drop much when he aged, so he should have a long time to develop. That build is very, very good. Honestly, when he was taken, he was the guy who kind of looked back and said and thought, hmm, should I have taken him 14th? Because the ground ball rate, the build, the repertoire looks. I mean, everything is everything that you like. The endurance just 56. Obviously, you keep moving him to a starter, and the power and movement will go up. So there's a little bit of a bonus there. Um, Dang, yeah, that's good. That's going to be a very, very good pitcher.
All right. Yeah, I don't see that good a pitcher there, but I definitely see a good pitcher, and I like the pick. So, again, yeah, it'll be fun to watch. Mets 28 as we're winding down the first round, taking Sam Chute, a 18-year-old left-handed power pitcher out of the great state of North Carolina. Um, he is a guy that puts up really good amateur numbers, puts up pretty good strikeout to walk ratio. Got a dominant fastball and a good changeup, which you always like to see. Doesn't necessarily have the highest projection in starting pitchers wise, but I think is going to be a pretty solid pitcher, especially at 18, with plenty of room to grow. Um, I like this pitcher. He was another one that was on my list that I thought would make it a little bit further than he did. But a lot of people want pitchers early in this draft, which makes sense considering it was basically a pitcher's draft. So I like the pick of Chute going once again to the Mets. You'd be happy to know that Chute and the gentleman Katzen, who you mentioned, project to be nearly identical. Shoot actually projects one less at each control, power, and movement. And because it's shoot, you're going to be bearish. Got it. Womp womp womp.
Um, yeah, I'm not all that big of a fan of him. The build, everything you see about him looks pretty nice. It's very tempting. But when you realize he's already jumped and it was a pretty significant jump, makes me wonder how much he's gonna age, how much his peak's gonna drop when he ages. Uh, if it drops at anywhere as close of what it jumped, yeah, he doesn't have a whole long time to develop. This could be a guy who could peak out at, I don't know, 20, 22, 23 maybe. Just concerned for how much time he has to jump. If he really had that 86 peak, sure, I like him. But knowing that, I think that's, yeah, there again, knowing that I think, but thinking that he should be probably more of like a low 80s peak. It looks more like a guy that you would want to take in the second round rather than the first round.
I feel the same way about our next pick at 29, Jarrell Shalero. Not a guy that was on my list. I see why TT took him with the very high ground ball rate. three pitches over his overall. Um, I mean, technically, all of his stuff is over his overall, but I think in there for me in lies part of the problem. Control is only seven above his overall. Movement's already four above. If we all know movement's going to just take off. 17 turning 18 over the offseason. Um, ugh, I think he ends up being a movement monster with no power and not enough control to go around. So um, not a fan of this guy. I always find it hard personally to take guys below 50 overall, especially in the first round. Um, that being said, TT took a guy, Rick Eldred, a couple seasons ago in the draft, later in the round that I really liked and ended up being really good. So, at least last I checked, it looks like he was ended up to be pretty good. So, same could happen here, but I feel like it won't.
Yeah, I guess I'm not overly a big fan of him. I can It's kind of one of those. Wait, really? This guy is going already? He has a nice ground ball rate, which is probably what really attracted him, as well as the 0 home runs his senior year of high school. So you'd think he won't give up many long balls. But other than that, there's not a lot to like about him that will kind of put the whole puzzle together. Yeah, I think this is the guy that's probably destined for the bullpen. And as far as me, unless he's going to be a dominant closer, I'm not wasting a first round pick on a relief arm.
It looks like Rick Eldred is still looking really good, and Jermaine is the current holder of his name. So, yeah, I think it's a high risk pick, and I'm not sure the high reward goes with this one either. So, um, finally to the end of the first round, Pittsburgh picking 30th, taking Jeremiah Broche, a 18-year-old switch hitting center fielder with a pretty good glove, big arm, decent glove, sees solid fielding, good health, um, and nice speed. The pretty good speed. Um, should steal some bags, hopefully. Contact's a little bit low, but at 18 with room to go and a switch hitter, hopefully that doesn't hold him back too much. Got a good eye at the very least. So um, I made the pick. I like the pick. I mean, this was a guy that when I sent my list, Andy, he was the top of the name, top name on the list with a couple of the other pitchers right behind him, just in case. But I figured end of the round, I'll take probably one of the only true speed guys in this draft.
He's not a bad player. You'll certainly get your steals with him. Pretty good base runner. Defense is there. He has a contact build. I really don't care about his contact being that low. You know, the contact's going to shoot up there and the power's not going to do anything. That's what will happen with his development. However, I made a better pick in the second round than him.
Wah, wah, wah. And he's talking about, of course, Chad Murphy, who is the other speed guy in the outfield in the draft. Very similar everything to Broche. Only difference is his range is a little bit better, and he's a lefty instead of a switchy. So it will be interesting to compare those two, I guess, as the things go on. Maybe that could be the next Kent Edwards debate, since that one is actually officially dead and over with. So it'll now become the Murphy Broche debate. It'll be a lot of fun to watch. So, um, the first baseman that Maddie referenced earlier is, of course, Jose Arrega, who went to Philly at 32 overall, projects to be a very good power lefty bat. Um, and the only thing with him is he had a 4 point drop on his birthday, which hampered him from going probably top 20 and put him down to 32nd overall. Um, Marshall Johnson went to the Dodgers. I know that was a guy that was talked about quite a bit in the pre-draft. Mega fastball, good slider, lefty, power build. We'll see what happens with Marshall Johnson out in Los Angeles. Again, Chad Murphy, we just mentioned, went to Cleveland. A good pick there in the mid-late round. San Francisco trying to make up for their bad pitching pick. Took Frankie Collin, a third baseman, who I just I like the bat. The control looks horror or the control. My bad. The contact does not look great. Power and eye looks good. He already had a birthday. He had a bit of a drop. It appears to be about another one of those 4 pointers, but that was a guy, one of the guys on my list that I'm kind of curious to see um, how he goes. Um, just noticed that Forrest Bartlett is F9 rest Bartlett. Um, don't know how that happened. But instead of an O, there's a 9 in there. So that is a curious thing of note for somebody that was taken by the A's. Um, I don't know how. It's, yeah, but Mogul makes up these names. It's not like Andy's making up these names as we go along. So,
Actually, Andy did make up that one. He edited that
oh,
one.
did he? Did he edit it? Okay, that makes more sense then. So, oh,
Or maybe we shouldn't have told you, and we should just let you believe that for his entire career.
was that one of the things that I saw in the chat the one day that he said something then quickly fixed it, so Andy went in there and fixed it. That's good. I like that. That's funny. So it would, it would make me sad. I really liked that name. It would make me a little bit sad, but it would also make a lot more sense because that just seemed like too good a randomly generated name. Are you telling me it was an edited name? Yeah, go ahead. I liked Alger better in the third round for Atlanta as far as catchers go, and I didn't realize he was still on the board, and I picked two before him, and then saw him go and was pissed at myself because he only had a 1 point drop on his birthday, and he looks got that big catcher arm. I like the pitcher Oakland took second to last in that second round to Jeff Ingoglia. L- Maddie, what about you? What are some of the names that are not necessarily
You guys,
names? Obviously, the best name was Peter Parker, another guy that went right before I was able to pick him. Not that he's gonna be a good player, but I want
you guys
Spider-Man on my
mentioned a
team.
handful of them. Hassan, Arianga. I will say, I guess I kind of find it funny that people see a 4 point drop and get really scared. I mean, on the surface, it's nothing to get scared about. You kind of got to look at what's the reality of it, and the reality is a 4 point drop is actually pretty normal. If you do the math on him, you're getting at least 5 years for him to develop, maybe six. Just depends on how it falls. If maybe he gets a couple of 3 point drops later on, you get an extra year out of him. So you can get 5, maybe 6 years out of him. Yeah, he could be a pretty good bat, especially being a lefty. Another one that I liked that you guys didn't already mention and ruin everything that I thought I was gonna say. Milwaukee in the second round, Jason Ome. A 16-year-old with that kind of a build is just really interesting. I really want to see where he develops to. I don't think he can stick in center field, but you can move him. Wait, why does he says center field? But okay, he says center field, but the mogul field says he's better at right, which is probably where I would say to play him. But you can play him in left too. Just be real interesting to see how that power develops if he's become a pretty nice power bat being that young. See, another one was I know it was Todd Falls was one of them picked in the fourth round at 96 overall. I just think it was interesting. As much as people wanted pitching, and for this kind of a build that he lasted that long. Um, to be honest, looking back and to where I see that one first rounder and what the Mets took him, where I think where I think his peak will fall. I don't think there's a whole lot of difference in both of those pitchers in the long run. Uh, Trying to think of who in the real late rounds I was trying to buy back in to get one of them and just couldn't. Um,
Was it one of the speed guys?
No, it's already got a speed guy, so I didn't care. Oh, Philly got another one. Jason Audrey. That's a real interesting guy. And we'll get to see here in just a few sims of if he's going to develop for a long time. Because if he does, I think that'll be a pretty solid catcher. Won't be a big time power guy. He might only be just a backup guy, but could definitely be a guy who you can be a. What was that guy that you and I had, J Main, Lewis, whatever his name? I already forgot his name. But at any rate, he can be a guy just like that and be your backup for most of a decade. But the guy that I was really trying to get the Mets got Paul Weatherby. I think this is just an interesting guy. Again, nothing really stands out about him, but seventh round pick with the power and eye being above the overall just makes me think of if he has time to develop, he could be decent.
You say Paul Weatherby, the first baseman, the guy that went third to last in the draft?
Yeah,
Yeah.
13 upside at 20 years old. If he only drops maybe 1 or 2 points when he ages, that's a guy who could have 4 or 5 years to develop. Maybe he at least becomes a guy who can be on the bench, be something better better than just wasting your pick. And for picks in this range that we're selling for about 1 mil, heck yeah.
Yeah, there was definitely a couple guys late round, late sixth, late fifth, that some of the hitters that I think have a little bit of a chance. So we'll see. There's always guys taking those late rounds that get that magic jump or something happens and everybody goes hooray. Um, so we'll see. It's always fun to see. Who? God, I'm sorry. I made a mistake of trying to read what Pierre was typing in chat about pizza. Um, anyway, I listen. Nothing wrong with artichoke on pizza. Artichoke pizza is pretty good. Um, yeah, I know a lot of people that will do not like it. My buddy and I used to, who's a vegetarian, I used to order artichoke pizza all the time. It's underrated. People who never haven't tried it, you need to. It's well worth the try. So, and that is the wisdom we will leave you with as we finish our draft podcast tonight. So, from all of us to all of you, um, good night and good luck on the rest of the season.